It was a chilly evening when Arjun, a kind-hearted man from a small village, was walking home after a long day of work. The sky was fading to dark, and the streets were quiet. Suddenly, he heard a faint whimpering sound from the side of the road. His heart skipped a beat. Following the sound, he found a tiny, trembling puppy, alone and abandoned. The poor creature looked starved, its fur matted with dirt and blood. Arjun couldn't bear to see it suffer. Without hesitation, he scooped the puppy into his arms, his heart aching at the thought of such a helpless creature left to die. "I won't let you go through this alone," he whispered, feeling a surge of determination. Arjun rushed to the village vet, his mind racing with fear for the puppy's life. As he entered the vet's clinic, he was relieved to see the vet, Dr. Raghav, still there. "Please, help. I found this puppy on the road. I think it needs urgent care," Arjun pleaded, his voice shaky with emotion. Dr. Raghav, a seasoned professional, immediately took the puppy from Arjun's arms. He carefully examined it, his brow furrowing with concern. The clinic was silent except for the soft whimpers of the puppy. But then, the vet's face turned pale. His hands trembled as he gently placed the puppy on the examination table. Arjun noticed the change in the vet's expression. "What's wrong, doctor? Is it going to be okay?" Dr. Raghav's voice was barely a whisper. This isn't just any puppy. Arjun, this is a wolf pup." Arjun froze. A wolf pup? His mind raced as he tried to comprehend what the vet was saying. A wild animal, abandoned on the side of the road? How did it end up like this? Arjun stammered, feeling a wave of guilt wash over him. Dr. Raghav continued, his voice low and serious, "This puppy is from a rare breed of wolves that roams the nearby forest. It must have been separated from its pack. The injuries you see on it, they aren't from the road. It looks like it was attacked." Arjun's heart sank. He had thought he was saving a helpless puppy, but now, he was faced with the reality of what it truly was. He had taken in a wild animal, one that might not survive, even with all the love and care he could give. The vet continued, "You were right to bring it in, but you must understand that this pup needs more than just care. It needs its pack, its natural environment. If we keep it here, it will grow up to struggle with survival in the wild." Tears welled up in Arjun's eyes as he looked down at the tiny wolf, whose eyes were now pleading with him, trusting him completely. "I never wanted this," Arjun whispered. "I only wanted to save it." The vet nodded, his expression softening. "You did save it, Arjun. You gave it a chance. But now, the best thing you can do is help it get back to where it belongs. To its home." The next morning, Arjun and Dr. Raghav set out together, carrying the pup into the forest, back to where it came from. The moment they reached the edge of the woods, the wolf pup perked up, its ears twitching. It looked up at Arjun one last time, as if to say thank you. As Arjun watched the pup vanish into the forest, he felt a bittersweet ache in his heart. He had saved it, not by keeping it, but by returning it to where it truly belonged. The emotional weight of the moment was too much to bear. He had done the right thing, but the bond they shared, even for a short time, would stay with him forever. Arjun walked back home, his heart heavy with the knowledge that sometimes, the most loving thing we can do for those we care about is to let them go. As Arjun made his way back home through the forest, his thoughts swirled in his mind like a storm. He had done the right thing, he told himself over and over. But that didn't stop the ache in his chest. The little wolf had looked up at him with those innocent eyes, as though it had been silently thanking him for the kindness he had shown. The forest around him seemed quieter now, as if it too understood the sacrifice he had made. The bond between man and animal had been brief, but it had been real. Arjun knew that the wolf pup would now have a chance to grow strong and survive in the wild. Yet, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision, the love he had felt for something he could never truly keep. Days passed, but the memory of the wolf pup lingered. Arjun would often find himself gazing into the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the pup, now part of the wild world it was born into. Each time, he felt a sense of emptiness, as if a piece of his heart had been left behind in the woods. One evening, as he walked near the same spot where he had found the pup, something unusual happened. There was a rustling in the bushes, followed by a low growl. Arjun froze in place, heart pounding, unsure of what to expect. But then, through the trees, emerged a figure. It was the wolf, grown now, stronger, more magnificent than he could have ever imagined. Its coat was thick, gleaming under the moonlight, and its eyes, those same eyes, met Arjun's gaze. For a long moment, neither moved. It was as if time stood still. The wolf stared at him, its expression calm yet filled with a quiet recognition. Arjun's heart swelled with emotions he couldn't fully understand. It was no longer the helpless pup he had saved, it was a wild creature, full of life, belonging to the forest. Then, as if satisfied with the reunion, the wolf turned and disappeared into the shadows of the trees, its form blending with the night. Arjun stood there for a while, the cool wind rustling through the leaves, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace wash over him. He understood now. The wolf was no longer the little pup he had held in his arms. It had found its place in the world, and so had he. In that moment, Arjun knew that what he had done had been the truest form of love, letting go when it mattered most. The wolf was free, and in its freedom, Arjun had found his own. From that day on, Arjun never felt alone. The memories of the pup, the quiet strength of the forest, and the silent bond they shared stayed with him. And every now and then, on the edge of the woods, he would see a flash of fur or hear the soft echo of a wolf's howl, and he would smile, knowing that the little creature he had saved had truly found its place in the world. And in some way, Arjun had, too. Weeks passed, but the feeling of peace that had settled in Arjun's heart stayed with him. The memory of the wolf pup, now grown and free, was a constant presence in his thoughts. The village around him carried on with its usual rhythm, but Arjun had changed. There was a quiet strength within him now, a sense of understanding that came from the brief but profound connection he had shared with the wild animal. One afternoon, while Arjun was tending to his small garden, he heard a familiar sound, a soft, distant howl, carried by the wind. It was faint, but unmistakable. His heart skipped a beat. He stood still, listening intently, the world around him falling silent as if it too were waiting. The howl was brief, but it filled him with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It was the wolf. In that moment, Arjun understood that the bond they had shared was eternal, not in the way of ownership or possession, but in the unspoken connection between two lives that had intersected for a short time, and that had changed them both forever. The wolf had found its place in the wild, and Arjun had found his peace in knowing he had helped it along its way. But life in the village continued to unfold in unexpected ways. One chilly morning, as Arjun made his way to the market, he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. There, sitting near the market square, was a woman holding a bundle of fur in her arms. As Arjun drew closer, his eyes widened in shock. It was another wolf pup. This one appeared just as vulnerable as the first, a small creature, its fur matted, its eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Arjun's heart ached as he instinctively moved toward the woman. She looked up at him with a sad smile, her eyes full of worry. "I found this little one by the river," she explained. "It looks like it was abandoned, just like the one you found before." Arjun's chest tightened. He had never expected this. It seemed as if fate had brought another pup into his life, but this time, he knew what needed to be done. He gently knelt before the woman and the pup, offering a comforting smile. "Don't worry," Arjun said softly, his voice steady. "I'll take care of it. I know exactly what needs to be done." As he held the tiny wolf pup in his arms, Arjun felt a familiar sense of responsibility, but this time, he wasn't filled with the same doubt. He knew that the pup needed more than just shelter, it needed to return to where it belonged, just as the first one had. His heart had learned that true love often meant sacrifice, and sometimes the greatest act of kindness was letting go. With the woman's help, Arjun set off once again toward the forest. The path felt familiar now, the trees and the rustling of leaves almost like old friends greeting him. When they reached the forest's edge, Arjun paused, holding the pup close to his chest. For a moment, he looked out over the landscape, his thoughts drifting back to the day he had released the first wolf. He remembered the quiet gaze of the wolf pup as it had turned and vanished into the woods. Arjun could almost feel the bond they had shared, as though it had left an imprint in the very air around him. With a deep breath, he gently placed the new pup on the soft ground. The small creature looked up at him with wide eyes, hesitant but trusting. Arjun whispered, "It's time for you to go back to your home." The little wolf stirred, then took a tentative step forward, its tiny legs shaky at first. But soon, it began to move with more confidence, guided by instincts Arjun could never truly understand. And as it disappeared into the trees, Arjun felt the same bittersweet peace he had felt before. He knew that both the first and the second wolf had now found their place in the world. He had done his part. Arjun watched for a moment longer, then turned away from the forest, knowing that his heart had once again grown, not in holding on, but in letting go. As he walked back to the village, the wind whispered through the trees, and Arjun could swear he heard the faintest howl in the distance, a sound of freedom, of survival, and of a bond that would never truly fade. And for the first time in a long while, he smiled, knowing that he had made a difference, not just in saving the pups, but in learning the true meaning of love. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is not to hold on, but to let go and trust that the world will take care of what we've given it. Months went by, and life in the village had returned to its usual pace. Arjun kept working on his farm, helping his neighbors, and living with a quiet contentment that came from knowing he had done something meaningful. The wolves, both the first and the second, had been set free, and though he missed them at times, he felt a deep peace in his heart. The memory of their time together, brief but intense, stayed with him, a reminder that sometimes life's greatest lessons came when we least expected them. One day, as winter approached and the first chill of the season filled the air, Arjun received an unexpected visitor. It was Dr. Raghav, the village vet, standing at his doorstep with a warm smile but a look of urgency in his eyes. "Arjun," Dr. Raghav said, stepping inside. "I need your help. There's something in the woods, something unusual." Arjun raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Dr. Raghav hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've received reports from a few villagers who've seen something strange wolves, but not like any we've seen before. They're not dangerous, but they're close to the village. People are getting scared." Arjun felt a tug of worry in his chest. He had heard rumors of wolves coming closer to the village over the past few weeks, but he hadn't paid much attention. "What do you need from me?" The vet's eyes softened. "I believe these wolves are from the same pack as the ones you helped. We need to know if they're the same ones. I know you're the one who understands them." Arjun felt a wave of uncertainty. It had been months since he had last seen those wolves, but he couldn't ignore the pull in his heart. The thought of them, of the little pups he had helped, filled him with a strange sense of responsibility. "I'll go," Arjun said after a long pause. "I'll see what I can do." The next morning, bundled in a heavy coat, Arjun and Dr. Raghav ventured into the forest together. The sky was overcast, and the ground was covered in a light dusting of snow. The woods felt different now, darker, quieter, as if holding its breath, waiting for something. After a few hours of walking, the air grew colder, and the wind howled through the trees. Then, just as they were beginning to doubt, they heard the sound. A distant, familiar howl, carried by the wind. Arjun's heart leaped in his chest. "It's them," he said, his voice filled with wonder. They followed the sound, deeper into the woods, until they came upon a clearing. And there, standing in the center, was a pack of wolves, majestic, powerful, and watchful. At the front of the pack was a larger wolf, its coat thick and shining with the colors of the forest. Its eyes locked with Arjun's, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Arjun's breath caught in his throat. It was the wolf, the first one he had saved, the one he had released into the wild months ago. It had grown, its coat gleaming with strength, but the bond between them was unmistakable. The wolf had returned, bringing with it a family. The pack circled slowly, their eyes wary but not hostile. It was as though they were waiting for Arjun to understand. The large wolf approached, and Arjun stepped forward cautiously, his heart racing. As he reached out, the wolf sniffed his hand, then nudged it with its nose, a gesture of trust. Arjun smiled softly, his heart swelling with emotion. Dr. Raghav watched in awe as Arjun knelt beside the wolf, the two of them sharing a silent understanding. The pack watched, but they didn't intervene. The bond between Arjun and the wolf had transcended words. It was a connection formed through kindness, sacrifice, and mutual respect. After a long moment, the wolf stepped back, its eyes flicking toward the rest of the pack. Arjun understood. It was time to let them go, to let them continue their journey through the wilderness. They had returned not for him, but to show him that they were thriving, that they were where they belonged. With a final glance, the wolf turned and led the pack deeper into the forest, their forms vanishing into the trees. Arjun stood there for a long time, the cold wind biting at his skin, but his heart was warm. He had helped them. He had set them free. And now, they were thriving, living as they were meant to. Dr. Raghav placed a hand on his shoulder. You did something incredible, Arjun. They're part of the wild now, but they'll never forget you. Arjun smiled, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't need them to remember me. I just needed to know they were safe. As they walked back to the village, the air felt lighter, the world brighter. Arjun knew that sometimes, the greatest gifts we can give are the ones that require us to let go. And though the wolves had returned to their wild home, a piece of them would always be with him. Years passed, and Arjun grew older, but the memory of the wolves never faded. Every winter, when the first snowflakes began to fall, he would stand at the edge of the forest and listen. And sometimes, just sometimes, he would hear that familiar howl, a reminder that love, no matter how fleeting, can change the world. As the years went by, Arjun's life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The village had grown, and so had the forest. The bond he had shared with the wolves, especially the first pup, remained a cherished memory that shaped his understanding of the world. His heart had become more attuned to the rhythms of nature, and he often found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned from those fleeting moments in the woods. The villagers had noticed a change in Arjun over the years. He had always been kind, but now there was a quiet wisdom about him, a deep understanding that came from his experiences. He no longer just tended to his farm, he nurtured the land, worked with the seasons, and treated the forest with the respect it deserved. Many came to him for advice, whether it was about crops or animals, and Arjun always listened carefully, offering guidance shaped by his bond with the wild. One crisp autumn evening, as Arjun walked through the forest, he felt a strange tug in his chest, like the wind was calling to him. It had been many years since that last encounter with the wolves, and he hadn't heard their howls in a long time. But that night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a familiar sound echoed through the trees. A low, mournful howl. Arjun's heart leaped in his chest. Could it be? He hadn't heard this in so long. The call was distant but unmistakable. He stopped in his tracks, listening intently, and his thoughts raced. Had the wolves returned to the forest? Or was it a different pack? Could it be the same wolf, the one he had saved all those years ago, reaching out to him? His legs moved on their own as he followed the sound. The forest seemed different tonight, as if it too remembered their connection. The moonlight cast long shadows, and the leaves rustled softly in the evening breeze. He moved deeper into the woods, his heart beating faster with each step. Soon, he found himself at the same clearing where he had encountered the wolves many years ago. The trees loomed large around him, and the ground beneath his feet felt familiar, like a place of memories. And there, in the center of the clearing, he saw a figure, a wolf, standing tall and proud. Arjun's breath caught in his throat. The wolf was larger now, its fur thick and shining with the colors of the forest. But the eyes, those same eyes, met his gaze. There was no mistaking it. It was the wolf he had saved, the one he had released all those years ago. And beside it, there were others, 3 young wolves, each with the same gleam of strength and wildness in their eyes. The wolf stepped forward, its movements graceful and powerful, and Arjun stood still, not moving, not daring to break the moment. The wolf sniffed the air, then circled around him, as if recognizing him once more. It paused, looking directly into Arjun's eyes, and for a moment, it seemed as though they were sharing a silent conversation and understanding that had spanned time and space. Then, the wolf stepped back, its eyes flicking toward the young wolves. Arjun's heart swelled with emotion. The wolf had a family now, its own pack, thriving in the wild. The young wolves, healthy and strong, were the legacy of the pup he had once saved. The wolf looked back at Arjun, and for the first time, it let out a soft, almost gentle howl. It wasn't a call to the wild, but rather a quiet thank you, a gift of acknowledgement for the bond they had shared. It was a recognition of all that had passed between them, and a sign that the wolf, in its freedom, had found its place in the world. Arjun's eyes filled with tears, but there was no sadness. Only a deep, unshakable peace. He had been part of something beautiful, something that had transcended time. And now, the wolf was home, with a family of its own, free in the wild, where it belonged. As the wolf turned to join its pack, Arjun knew it was time to let go once more. But this time, there was no ache in his heart. The love he had felt for the pup, the wild creature he had saved, had blossomed into something greater, something that reached beyond ownership, beyond possession. It was a love rooted in the wild, in freedom, in the understanding that true love is selfless. With one last look, Arjun turned to leave the clearing, knowing that the wolves would be all right. They were a part of the forest, a part of nature's grand design, and they would always remember the man who had given them a chance at life. And as he walked back through the forest, the first snow of the season began to fall gently around him. The soft flakes landed on his shoulders, on the ground, on the trees, all of it quiet and peaceful. In the distance, he heard the faintest echo of a howl. It was the sound of a wild heart, free and unbroken. Arjun smiled to himself, knowing that in the grand cycle of life, everything had come full circle. The wolves had returned, their legacy carried on in the forest, in the very air around him. And though they were wild, they would always carry with them a piece of the kindness, the love, and the freedom he had given them. For Arjun, the greatest lesson of all was clear: love, when given freely, never truly leaves. It lives on in the hearts of those we touch, and in the wild places where the world still remembers.